Hello, Tim Kerin here from Mortgage Choice in Kingsley. Today I want to talk about pre-approvals, whether it's something you should get and what it actually means in terms of the process of buying a property. If you're watching this video, there's a good chance it's because I've sent it to you because you've asked me, should I get a pre-approval, can I get a pre-approval, what do I do to take the first step in buying a house? My opinion on this has changed over the course of the last 15 or so years that I've been a mortgage broker. When I started, a lot of the lending expertise that exists in Australia was in bank branches. And so when you submitted a pre-approval application, which is to say, how much would you lend me if I bought a house? It was assessed by a human being with lots of lending experience. And that person was able to make a decision that, subject to this one thing I'm concerned about being sorted out, we would lend you this much if you bought a house that was in Perth, for example. That's changed a lot. We went through a period where we started to get more and more online lending capability. That is the ability to go to a bank like that, go to their website and type in your own information yourself and get a pre-approval online that was subject to a longer list of criteria. But it wasn't assessed by a human being, it was assessed by a computer. It was just a computer looking at your numbers, doing the number crunching in the background and going, yep. If we ended up agreeing with all those numbers once we looked at the evidence, which is a massive if and an important part of my job to validate, then we would lend the money. So we've gone from a human being assessing it to a computer assessing it, and a computer not looking at anywhere near as much information back then. What happened next is a lot of people started to utilise that, and lenders were finding that for every home loan they actually did that got to settlement and they started earning money from it, there might have been 3, 4, 5 pre-approvals that happened, and it just wasn't worth devoting human energy and time and wages to assessing these. So fast forward to now, we're at a point where a pre-approval these days is a matter of you and I going right through the full process of collecting all the evidence, all the compliance paperwork, making all the important decisions. It's an in-depth, important process to get right in order to submit an application to a lender with the evidence. And then most of the time, in most cases, they don't look at the evidence. The computer system just spits back an answer. And I already know what that answer is because I've already crunched the numbers beforehand. So the pre-approval these days almost always doesn't tell me anything I don't already know and that I haven't already discussed with you by the time we get to that point. So pre-approval, most of the time, and there are some exceptions, there's some situations where it's worth it, but most of the time, a pre-approval, in my opinion, is a complete waste of time. The other thing that's changed is over those last 15 years, real estate agents have come to understand that a pre-approval that's just printed out from a bank's website can turn out to just be wrong. Well, not necessarily wrong, but by the time you submit a full loan application and get a human being to assess it with a contract of sale for a place you've bought, then they might say no where the pre-approval said yes because they've actually seen all the evidence. So what, in my experience, real estate agents are much more comfortable relying on now is if you're a customer of a mortgage broker, which now 60% of home loans being done in Australia are, if you're one of my customers, then I can very comfortably have a conversation with a real estate agent that says, I've looked at your situation, I've looked at the evidence, I understand lending, and I have 15 years lending experience. I think this is going to be fine. Or subject to us clarifying this one thing that I'm not sure how a lender will respond, and we have no choice but to put it in front of a credit assessor and find out. Usually that's not the case, but subject to whatever I think is important, I think this would be fine, or here's how difficult it would need to be, or here's how much deposit we need to make sure it's going to work, or we can't go above this purchase price. I'm able to have an experienced conversation with a real estate agent, and they're able to understand, okay, I now have a good gauge of how likely this person is to get finance. So, in summary, I think it's far more valuable for us to sit down and talk about the important aspects of what your finance application would look like, what it is you want to do, clarify any concerns we might have, get to the point where I have a strong, confident opinion about your chances, and then I'm happy to relay that to a real estate agent. I'm also happy to provide a loan eligibility certificate, which doesn't require going through all of the lending compliance process. It's a much simpler, more straightforward thing to do. That is effectively my version of a pre-approval that gives something in writing that says what you qualify for, subject to pretty much the conditions you would see in a pre-approval. So, long story short, rather than a pre-approval, most of the time the right solution is to simply say, we've looked in depth at your situation, we have this degree of confidence about how it's going to work, and I'm happy to put that in writing to whoever wants to hear it. And when you're making an offer on a property and you're talking to a real estate agent, give them my business card, give them the opportunity to talk to me with your permission, and I can explain to them exactly what your chances are, and then we can confidently go forward. And then we get to skip the entire pre-approval process. And then when a purchase of a property is definitely going ahead, when you've made an offer and it's been accepted and we know exactly how much it's for, we can look at the market at that point and figure out who's got the right deal at that point, not what we necessarily picked 2 months ago when we did the pre-approval, which might now not be the best option. And we can pick the best option on the day and go ahead with that. So should you get a pre-approval? Probably not, but let's have a conversation about it, just in case your situation is an exception where it's a really good idea, because sometimes it is. Hope that helps. I hope that makes it clear. Thanks.